The words Eric spat out stung like venom, each syllable dripping with disdain. I've had enough. She's just a lazy burden. You failed as a mother, raising her to be this useless. My heart sank as I watched Abby's fragile form tremble, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. How could any decent human treat a pregnant woman, their own wife, with such cruelty? She's your wife, Eric, I cried out, barely containing my rage. Pregnant with your child, what kind of man are you? Abby flinched at my raised voice, her hands instinctively cradling her swollen belly. I wanted nothing more than to shield her from this monster I once trusted with my daughter's well-being. Eric sneered, his features twisted into an ugly mask of contempt. Some man I turned out to be, stuck with this pathetic excuse for a wife. I should have known better than to marry someone so weak and useless. Each venomous word felt like a physical blow, and I struggled to maintain my composure. How had things spiraled so catastrophically? Where had I gone wrong in raising Abby to end up with such a vile creature? As a single mother, I had poured every ounce of my being into providing Abby with a loving, supportive home after her father's untimely death. We had been a team, navigating life's challenges together, and I had reveled in watching her blossom into a kind, intelligent young woman. Yet, somewhere along the way, I had failed to instill in her the strength to recognize and reject such blatant emotional abuse. The signs had been there, subtle at first, but I had been too blinded by my desire for Abby's happiness to see the truth. Now, as I watched her shrink under Eric's withering gaze, I knew I had to take action. No child of mine would ever suffer such cruelty, not while I still drew breath. Get out of my house, Eric, I hissed, mustering every ounce of courage I possessed. And if you ever come near my daughter or grandchild again, I swear to God, you'll regret the day you were born. As the door slammed shut behind Eric's retreating form, I felt the weight of years past bear down upon me. Raising Abby alone after her father's passing had been the greatest challenge of my life, but also my proudest achievement. Those early years were a blur of sleepless nights, juggling work and motherhood with an almost manic determination. Yet, through it all, Abby had been my constant source of joy and motivation. Her bright smile and infectious laughter had been the balm that soothed my weariest days. I reminisced about the times we'd spend evenings cuddled on the couch, reading her favorite storybooks or watching her beloved Disney movies. Even as she grew older, our bond only strengthened, and I relished every moment we shared. Abby had been a shy, introverted child, often preferring the company of her books to that of her peers. I had worried at times that her quietness might impede her ability to form meaningful connections later in life. But as she blossomed into a beautiful young woman, I saw her confidence grow, her warmth and kindness drawing friends and admirers alike. It was through one such friend that Abby met Eric, the man who would ultimately become her undoing. At first he had seemed charming, attentive, and supportive, everything a mother could hope for in her daughter's partner. I had been foolishly blind to the warning signs, so desperate was I for Abby to find happiness. He's such a nice young man, Mom, Abby had gushed, her eyes alight with infatuation. He really listens to me and makes me feel understood in a way I've never experienced before. Foolishly, I had believed her, allowing myself to be swayed by Eric's polished facade and empty platitudes. How I wished I could go back and shake some sense into my naive younger self. The first crack in Eric's mask appeared mere months into their marriage. Abby confided in me about his occasional bouts of anger, his cutting remarks that left her feeling small and inadequate. I had brushed it off as newlywed growing pains, assuring her that all couples experienced rough patches. But the emotional abuse only escalated, until Abby found herself trapped in a cycle of gaslighting and manipulation, her once vibrant spirit dimming with each passing day. By the time she discovered her pregnancy, she was but a shell of her former self, terrified and desperate for an escape. Yet, even as I cradled her trembling form in my arms, soothing her frantic sobs, I could never have anticipated the depths of Eric's depravity. The man who had once sworn to cherish and protect my daughter had become her own personal demon, tormenting her with cruel words and indifference. As I tended to Abby's needs, my rage toward Eric festered, a slow-burning ember that threatened to erupt into an all-consuming inferno. He would pay for what he had done, of that I was certain. No one harmed my family and walked away unscathed. Abby's haunted gaze bore into me, her eyes reflecting a lifetime of torment condensed into a single, heart-wrenching moment. Each trembling word that spilled from her lips felt like a dagger piercing my soul. He wouldn't let me rest, Mom. No matter how sick I felt or how much my body ached, Eric demanded that I keep up with all the household chores. She paused, drawing a shuddering breath. He said it was my duty as his wife, that I was just being lazy and selfish. Rage surged through my veins, an all-consuming fire that threatened to engulf me. How dare that vile excuse for a human treat my daughter, his own pregnant wife, with such callous disregard? "Did he not see how much you were suffering?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper as I fought to maintain my composure. Abby shook her head, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "He didn't care, Mom. All he cared about was his own convenience, his own needs. I was just a burden to him, an inconvenience to be endured." The mental image of my strong, vibrant daughter, reduced to a mere servant in her own home, denied even the basic compassion owed to an expectant mother, twisted like a knife in my gut. Eric's cruelty knew no bounds. I tried to reason with him, to make him understand how difficult this pregnancy was for me, Abby continued, her voice wavering. But he just brushed me off, telling me I was being dramatic and oversensitive. I pulled her into a fierce embrace, cradling her against me as the sobs racked her frail form. "Shh, baby, it's okay. You're safe now. That monster can't hurt you anymore." But even as I uttered those words, I knew they rang hollow. Eric's poison had seeped too deep, leaving invisible scars that would take far longer to heal than any physical wound. "He left me here, Mom," Abby whispered, her voice thick with anguish. "He said he was done with me, that I was no longer his problem. He just abandoned me, like I was nothing." White-hot fury coursed through me, threatening to choke out all rational thought. How could any man, any human being, treat the mother of his unborn child with such utter disdain? In that moment, a profound shift occurred within me. A maternal instinct ignited with the force of a supernova. Eric had awoken a primal, protective rage that would not be sated until he paid for his sins in full. "Listen to me, Abby," I said, grasping her shoulders and forcing her to meet my gaze. "That bastard will never lay a finger on you or my grandchild again. I swear on my life I will not rest until he gets what's coming to him." Abby's eyes widened, a flicker of hope kindling amidst the despair. "But how, Mom? He's so powerful, so influential. He'll just bury us with his wealth and connections." A grim smile tugged at my lips as I brushed away the tears streaking her cheeks. "Leave that to me, sweetheart. I may be just a single mother, but I'm also a force to be reckoned with when it comes to protecting my family." With steely resolve, I vowed to myself that Eric Sterling would soon learn the true depth of a mother's wrath. His reign of terror was over, and the wheels of karma were already in motion. In the days that followed, my sole focus became helping Abby heal from the emotional trauma inflicted by that monster she once called her husband. I enlisted the aid of our neighbors, Megan and Paul Collins, who had become like family over the years. Megan, a warm-hearted soul with an unwavering moral compass, took Abby under her wing, providing a listening ear and a shoulder to lean on. Her empathy and kindness were like a soothing balm, slowly mending the gaping wounds in Abby's psyche. Paul, a respected psychologist, offered his professional expertise, guiding Abby through weekly therapy sessions designed to help her process the abuse and rebuild her shattered self-esteem. His gentle yet firm approach gradually coaxed her out of the shell she had retreated into, allowing her true strength to resurface. With their support, I witnessed a remarkable transformation in my daughter. The haunted look in her eyes began to fade, replaced by a glimmer of determination that grew brighter with each passing day. Slowly but surely, the vibrant, spirited young woman I had raised emerged from the ashes of Eric's cruelty. As Abby's due date approached, I made the difficult decision to take a temporary leave from my job, putting my career on hold to focus entirely on her well-being. Money would be tight, but no sacrifice was too great when it came to ensuring the safety and happiness of my family. Megan and Paul rallied around us, offering not only emotional support, but also practical assistance. Megan helped with household chores and meal preparations, while Paul kept a watchful eye on Abby's mental state, adjusting her therapy as needed. Through it all, the mere thought of Eric's name ignited a simmering rage within me. The knowledge that he remained free, untouched by the consequences of his actions, was a festering wound that refused to heal. But I bided my time, channeling my anger into providing Abby with the love and care she so desperately needed. Vengeance could wait. My daughter's recovery took precedence over all else. The day Abby went into labor, I felt a strange sense of calm wash over me. As I held her hand and coached her through each contraction, I marveled at her resilience, her determination to bring new life into the world despite the darkness she had endured. When our beautiful granddaughter, Grace, finally arrived, it was as if a weight had been lifted from our shoulders. Cradling her tiny, perfect form, I felt a surge of hope and purpose flood through me. This innocent child would never know the pain and fear that her mother had experienced. I would ensure it, no matter the cost. In that sacred moment, with Abby beaming down at her newborn daughter, a silent vow echoed through my soul. Eric Sterling would pay dearly for the suffering he had inflicted upon us. The wheels of karma were already in motion, and his reckoning would be both swift and merciless. For now, though, I allowed myself to bask in the warmth of new life, cherishing the bond between mother and child that Eric had so callously disregarded. His day of reckoning would come, but for the moment, all that mattered was the love and joy radiating from Abby's exhausted yet radiant smile. The first time Eric stepped foot in the hospital room, a mere 3 days after Grace's birth, the air seemed to crackle with tension. Abby visibly shrank back into the pillows, clutching our precious bundle protectively to her chest. "What are you doing here?" I demanded, positioning myself between him and the bed, in a protective stance. Eric sneered, his cold eyes sweeping over Abby with disdain. "I'm here to see my child, of course. Or did you think you could keep her from me?" "Your child?" I scoffed, barely containing my rage. "You forfeited any right to call her that the moment you abandoned her mother in her hour of need." His jaw tightened, but he made no move to approach, clearly sensing the unwavering resolution in my stance. Instead, he turned his gaze toward Abby, his voice dripping with condescension. "Well, aren't you going to introduce me to my daughter, or are you too useless to even manage that?" Abby flinched as if struck, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. In that moment, I saw the fear and trauma etched into every line of her face, the scars left by Eric's emotional abuse running deeper than any physical wound. Before I could respond, Megan's voice cut through the tension like a whip crack. "That's enough, Eric. Your appalling behavior has gone too far." Spinning around, I found Megan standing in the doorway, her usually warm features set in a mask of steely determination. Paul hovered behind her, his expression equally resolute. "Abby has no obligation to subject herself or her child to your toxic presence," Megan continued, her words laced with venom. "Not after the way you've treated her." Eric's lip curled in a sneer as he turned to face our allies. "This is none of your concern. It's a family matter, and I'll thank you to stay out of it." Paul stepped forward, his normally gentle demeanor replaced by a cold, authoritative presence that brooked no argument. "On the contrary, Eric, it very much is my concern. As your superior at the firm, I can't ignore the clear evidence of your abusive behavior toward your wife and child." A flicker of unease crossed Eric's face, but he quickly masked it with a veneer of arrogance. "You have no proof, just the hysterical ramblings of a hormonal woman." "Don't I?" Megan countered, producing a thick manila folder from her bag. "I've been documenting your actions for months, Eric. Every cruel word, every demeaning insult, every instance of emotional and psychological abuse, it's all here, laid out in excruciating detail." Eric's confident facade crumbled as he stared at the damning evidence in Megan's hands. For the first time, I saw a flicker of fear in his eyes, a realization that his carefully constructed web of lies was unraveling. "You'll never make those accusations stick," he blustered, but the waver in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. Paul fixed him with an unwavering stare. "I wouldn't be so sure about that. With the evidence we have, coupled with Abby's testimony, you'll be lucky to avoid criminal charges, let alone keep your job." A heavy silence hung in the air, punctuated only by the soft coos of the newborn Grace, blissfully unaware of the drama unfolding around her. In that moment, I felt a surge of pride and gratitude for the people who had rallied to our defense. As Eric slouched out of the room, his arrogance finally punctured. I knew that the wheels of karma had been set in irreversible motion. His reign of terror was nearing its end, and he would soon face the consequences of his actions. Turning back to Abby, I saw a glimmer of hope shining in her eyes, a spark of determination that had been dormant for far too long. With the support of our loved ones, we would weather this storm and emerge victorious, our family bond stronger than ever before. 3 months after Grace's birth, the fragile peace we had cultivated was shattered by Eric's unexpected arrival. One moment, Abby and I were cooing over Grace's latest milestone, and the next, his thunderous pounding echoed through the house. "Open up, Abby!" he bellowed, his voice laced with fury. "You can't keep me from my daughter forever!" Abby tensed, her arms tightening protectively around Grace's tiny form. The fear in her eyes cut me to the core, a stark reminder of the emotional trauma she had endured. "Stay here," I whispered, pressing a reassuring kiss to her forehead before rising to confront the source of our torment. Eric's face was twisted into an ugly sneer as I swung open the door, his eyes blazing with a dangerous cocktail of rage and entitlement. "What do you want, Eric?" I demanded, positioning myself squarely in the doorway to block his path. "I'm here for my wife and child," he spat, attempting to push past me. "This little game of yours has gone on long enough." I stood my ground, unflinching in the face of his aggression. "Abby is no longer your wife, and you have no claim over that innocent child. Not after the way you've treated them." His nostrils flared, and for a moment I braced myself for an explosive outburst. But then a sly grin spread across his features, sending a chill down my spine. "You think you can keep me away with some pathetic little restraining order?" he sneered. "I have resources you can't even begin to imagine. One word from me, and your precious Abby's life will become a living hell." Before I could respond, a familiar voice cut through the tension like a knife. "I wouldn't be so sure about that, Eric." Paul stepped into view, his expression a mask of cold fury. Beside him stood Megan, her steely gaze fixed on Eric with an intensity that could have melted steel. "What's this?" Eric scoffed, his bravado faltering slightly. "You brought your little posse for backup?" "They're here to ensure you face the consequences of your actions," Paul stated, his voice laced with barely contained contempt. "Actions that have not gone unnoticed at the firm." Eric paled, the realization of his precarious position dawning on his features. "You can't touch me. I'm too valuable to the company." "On the contrary," Paul countered, producing a thick manila folder from his briefcase. "Your behavior has been meticulously documented, Eric. Verbal abuse, intimidation, unethical business practices. The list goes on and on." With each accusation, Eric's composure crumbled further, his mask of arrogance slipping to reveal the desperation lurking beneath. "You can't prove any of that," he blustered, but the waver in his voice betrayed his uncertainty. Megan stepped forward, her expression one of grim satisfaction. "We have more than enough evidence to not only terminate your employment but also pursue legal action for the emotional and psychological trauma you've inflicted on Abby." Eric's eyes darted between us, panic setting in as he realized the depth of the hole he had dug for himself. "This isn't over," he snarled, his face contorted with rage. "You'll regret this, all of you." But even as he hurled his empty threats, I could see the defeat etched into every line of his face. The once powerful man who had held us all in his thrall was reduced to a pathetic shell, his carefully constructed facade crumbling to dust. As Eric retreated, his parting words ringing hollow in his wake, I felt a profound sense of relief wash over me. The nightmare was finally drawing to a close, and justice would soon be served. Turning back to Abby, I found her gazing at me with a mixture of awe and gratitude, her arms cradling our precious Grace with a renewed sense of confidence. In that moment, I knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. A united front forged in the fires of adversity. Eric's reign of terror was over, and our family's future burned brighter than ever before. In the days following Eric's confrontation, a palpable shift occurred, as if the universe itself was righting the wrongs he had committed. Paul's intervention at the firm proved to be the catalyst that unleashed a torrent of long-buried allegations against Eric. One by one, former colleagues' subordinates came forward, emboldened by the knowledge that their voices would finally be heard. Tales of verbal abuse, intimidation tactics, and unethical business practices soon flooded the company's inboxes, painting a damning portrait of Eric's true character. Within a week, the once untouchable executive found himself unceremoniously dismissed, his illustrious career reduced to ashes by the weight of his own misdeeds. The news spread like wildfire, and Eric's reputation went up in flames, his carefully cultivated image of success crumbling under the intense scrutiny. As the professional fallout escalated, Meghan and Paul worked tirelessly to build an airtight legal case against Eric. Abby's testimony, coupled with the mountain of evidence they had accumulated, left little room for doubt or equivocation. When the divorce proceedings finally commenced, it was a mere formality. Eric's lawyers, sensing the futility of their position, advised him to accept the terms and avoid further public humiliation. In the end, Abby emerged victorious, awarded sole custody of Grace and a sizable settlement that would ensure their financial security for years to come. A restraining order was swiftly issued, severing Eric's ability to inflict any further harm upon our family. As the gavel fell sealing Eric's fate, I watched him closely, searching for any flicker of remorse or contrition. But his expression remained a mask of defiance, his eyes burning with barely restrained fury. It wasn't until the courtroom had emptied, leaving only Eric and his legal team behind, that the facade finally cracked. Meghan, ever the vigilant observer, witnessed the moment when Eric's bravado shattered, his shoulders slumping in defeat as the full weight of his transgressions bore down upon him. "He broke down, Sarah," she recounted later, her voice tinged with a hint of pity. "All the bluster and arrogance drained away, and he just crumpled." For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But any hint of sympathy I might have harbored was quickly extinguished by the memory of Abby's haunted eyes, the trauma she had endured at Eric's hands. He had brought this reckoning upon himself through his own despicable actions, and he would receive no quarter from me. As the dust settled and the legal battles faded into memory, Eric's life spiraled into a tailspin of public disgrace and financial ruin. His once formidable wealth evaporated, consumed by legal fees and the settlement he was forced to pay Abby. Word of his misdeeds spread like wildfire, rendering him virtually unhireable in his chosen profession. Gone were the days of wealth and influence, replaced by a cruel reality of his own making. Through it all, Abby blossomed, her confidence and self-assurance growing with each passing day. The weight of Eric's oppression had been lifted, and she was finally free to embrace her true potential, unencumbered by the shackles of his abuse. As I watched her thrive, reveling in the joys of motherhood and rediscovering her passions, I felt a profound sense of satisfaction settle over me. The wheels of karma had turned, and Eric Sterling had reaped the bitter harvest he had sown through his cruelty. Justice had been served, but more importantly, our family had emerged stronger and more resilient than ever before. The nightmare was over, and a new chapter of healing and growth awaited us, untainted by the specter of Eric's malice. With Eric's toxic influence finally excised from our lives, a profound sense of peace and renewal washed over us. It was as if a dark cloud had lifted, allowing the warmth of hope and possibility to shine through once more. Abby, buoyed by her legal victory and the unwavering support of our loved ones, blossomed before my very eyes. The haunted, fragile woman who had sought refuge on my doorstep all those months ago was replaced by a radiant, self-assured mother, her eyes sparkling with a newfound strength and determination. Grace, our precious little ray of sunshine, thrived in the loving, nurturing environment we had created for her. Each milestone, every giggle and babbled word was a poignant reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the power of a mother's love to overcome even the darkest of circumstances. Meghan and Paul remained steadfast pillars of support, their friendship and guidance invaluable as we navigated this new chapter of our lives. Meghan, ever the voice of reason, offered sage advice on everything from childcare to personal growth, while Paul continued to provide Abby with the therapeutic tools she needed to heal from the emotional scars of her ordeal. As for me, I found solace in the knowledge that my unwavering devotion to my family had been vindicated. The sleepless nights, the sacrifices, and the battles fought had all been worth it to ensure the safety and well-being of my loved ones. With Eric's influence effectively neutralized, We were free to rebuild our lives on our own terms, unencumbered by the weight of his toxic presence. Abby, emboldened by her newfound independence, began exploring career opportunities, determined to provide a stable and secure future for Grace. I, too, found myself reevaluating my priorities, realizing that my dedication to my job had often come at the expense of cherished moments with my family. Retirement, once a distant dream, suddenly seemed within reach, and I began to contemplate the prospect of devoting my golden years to the pure, unadulterated joy of being a doting grandmother. Through it all, the shadow of Eric's cruelty loomed, a constant reminder of the darkness we had overcome. Yet, rather than allowing it to consume us, we channeled that experience into a renewed appreciation for the bond that held our family together. Abby, in particular, seemed to draw strength from the knowledge that she had not only survived, but emerged victorious from her ordeal. The once meek, timid girl who had been so easily cowed by Eric's intimidation tactics had blossomed into a fierce, resilient woman, her spirit tempered by the fires of adversity. "I won't let him define me anymore, Mom," she declared one evening as we sat together, basking in the warmth of Grace's infectious giggles. "He tried to break me, but in the end he only made me stronger." In that moment I felt an immense surge of pride, not just for Abby's perseverance, but for the unwavering love and support that had carried us through the darkest of times. Our family had been tested, stretched to the limits of endurance, but we had emerged on the other side, battered yet unbroken. As the summer sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink, I found myself filled with a profound sense of gratitude. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was abundantly clear. No matter what challenges lay before us, we would face them together, a united front forged in the crucible of adversity. Eric Sterling's reign of terror was but a distant memory, and the future burned bright with the promise of new beginnings and endless possibilities.